January 16th, 1980. A quiet patch of farmland in Douglas County, Colorado. Frost clings to the grass, the Rocky Mountains loom in the distance, and the body of a 21-year-old journalism intern is discovered, bound, gagged, raped, and stabbed to death. Her name was Helene Pruszynski, a promising young woman from Massachusetts who had only just moved to Colorado to chase her dreams. What happened in her final moments haunted detectives, chilled a community, and left a family in ruin. For nearly 40 years, her case would remain ice cold until a scientific breakthrough and a drop of blood cracked it wide open. This is the story of a murder that went unsolved for decades, and the killer who almost got away with everything. Welcome to True Crime Record, and today we're unraveling the tragic and long cold case of Helene Pruszynski. Helene Pruszynski was just 21 years old when her life was cut short. Born in 1958 in Bedford, Massachusetts, Helene grew up in a loving, close-knit family. She was bright, thoughtful, and driven. A student at Wheaton College in Norton, Massachusetts, she had a passion for writing, storytelling, and truth-seeking, a natural fit for a future in journalism. In the winter of 1979, she landed a coveted internship with KHOW, a popular Denver radio station. It was a dream opportunity, her chance to get her foot in the door of a competitive industry. So, in early January of 1980, Helene left the comfort of her New England home and moved in with relatives in Englewood, Colorado, a suburb just outside of Denver. Each day, she took the bus to downtown Denver for her internship. Her days were spent learning, writing, and contributing to a team that saw promise in her. But just 10 days into this new chapter, her story would come to a brutal, tragic end. On the evening of January 16, 1980, Helene finished her day at the station and boarded her usual RTD bus to return home. But somewhere between her stop and the short walk to her aunt and uncle's house, she vanished. She never made it home. At first, there was confusion. Her relatives assumed she'd gotten held up or made plans with new friends. But when hours passed and she still hadn't shown up, fear set in. A missing persons report was filed. It wouldn't be long before their worst fears were confirmed. Just one day later, on January 17th, a rancher in Douglas County, around 15 miles south of where Helene was last seen, discovered something horrific: a young woman's body lying in a snow-covered field. She had been gagged with her own scarf, bound at the wrists, raped, and stabbed multiple times in the back. There were defensive wounds, signs she had fought for her life. Dental records confirmed what everyone feared. It was Helene. The news of Helene's murder sent shockwaves through Colorado and her hometown of Bedford. The crime was vicious, seemingly random, and devoid of obvious motive. Investigators combed through the evidence. They collected semen from the crime scene, a rarity in 1980. They interviewed witnesses, retraced her last known steps, and followed every lead they could. But in a pre-DNA era, the technology simply wasn't there. No fingerprints, no credible eyewitnesses, and no solid suspects. The case quickly turned cold. Over the years, detectives would revisit it again and again, hoping for new technology, new leads, anything to help them close the case. Her family never gave up hope, even as time dragged on. But as months turned into years, and years into decades, it seemed like justice might never come. In 2018, everything changed. The Golden State Killer case once thought unsolvable, was cracked open by a revolutionary new method, genetic genealogy. For the first time, law enforcement could use commercial DNA databases to trace suspects through family trees. Inspired by this breakthrough, Douglas County investigators sent the DNA evidence from Helene's case to Parabon Nano Labs, a company at the forefront of this emerging field. Through painstaking research, genetic genealogist C.C. Moore built a family tree based on the DNA sample. She traced it back through distant relatives and eventually narrowed it down to one family, then one man, James Curtis Clanton. Clanton was no stranger to law enforcement. Back in the 1970s, he had served time for a rape in Arkansas, where he had kidnapped a young woman at knife point, tied her up, and sexually assaulted her. He served just a few years before being released. By the time Helene was killed in 1980, Clanton was living in Colorado, under the radar. Eventually, he changed his name to Curtis Allen White and moved to Florida. He married, started a new life, and stayed out of trouble, at least on the surface. But now the past was catching up to him. In 2019, nearly 40 years after Helene's murder, detectives began surveilling Clanton in Florida. They waited patiently until he tossed away a used beer can. That can was collected, tested, and matched the DNA found on Helene's body. The match was undeniable. On December 16, 2019, police arrested James Clanton in Union County, Florida. He was extradited to Colorado to face charges for first-degree murder and rape. When confronted with the evidence, Clanton confessed. He told investigators he saw Helene walking alone and offered her a ride. She declined. That's when he abducted her at knife point, drove her to a field, and carried out the unspeakable. In July 2020, Clanton took a plea deal and was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. For the Prusinski family, it was a bittersweet end. They had waited decades for justice, but nothing could bring Helene back. Her cousin Janet Johnson told the court, "Helene was a shining light, bright, kind, talented. She deserved the world." Helene's murder had cast a long shadow, but her case also marked a turning point. It became one of the first in Colorado to be solved using forensic genealogy. A cold case cracked open, not by chance, but by science and relentless determination. Helene Pruszynski was more than just a victim. She was a daughter, a sister, a friend, a writer. Her life mattered, and though it was stolen too soon, her story continues to change lives. Her case now serves as a reminder that no matter how much time has passed, justice can still be found. Thanks to the tireless efforts of investigators, the power of DNA, and the rise of genetic genealogy, cold cases once thought impossible are being solved. Helene's voice may have been silenced, but the truth she died for, that still echoes today. She was young, vibrant, a beloved teacher who brought life into her classroom every morning. But on a cold December day in 1992, someone made sure she would never walk through those doors again. Her body was found brutally assaulted, strangled, beaten, and left behind in her own home. For over 2 decades, her killer walked free, until one small trace of DNA opened the floodgates of justice. This is the tragic murder of Christy Mirack. Welcome to True Crime Record, where we uncover the darkest corners of real-life crime stories that have shaken communities and baffled investigators. If you enjoy in-depth true crime storytelling, make sure to subscribe and tap the notification bell so you never miss a case. Christy Mirack was just 25 years old when her life was taken. A graduate of Millersville University in Pennsylvania, Christy was an enthusiastic and inspiring elementary school teacher at Roarstown Elementary in Lancaster. Friends described her as the kind of teacher who made students excited to come to school. She was vibrant, stylish, social, and full of energy. But behind the smile was a woman living alone, navigating her career and finding her place in the world. Christy lived by herself in an apartment on Schoolhouse Lane. She had a tight-knit group of friends, and like many young women, she spent her weekends going out, staying active, and enjoying life. There were no obvious enemies, no known threats, nothing to suggest what was about to happen. It was the morning of December 21st, 1992, just days before Christmas. Christy was supposed to be at school that day, but when she didn't show up to her classroom, her principal, Harry Goodman, grew concerned. He tried calling her. No answer, so he decided to drive to her home himself. What he found was chilling. When he arrived at her apartment around 9 a.m., the front door was slightly ajar. As he pushed it open and stepped inside, he discovered Christy's body on the living room floor. She was badly beaten, strangled, and partially undressed. It was clear she had been sexually assaulted. The crime scene was brutal. Investigators said it was a crime filled with rage. There were signs of a struggle. Her body bore injuries that showed she had fought back. A wooden cutting board had been used to beat her. She had suffered blunt force trauma and had been strangled to death. The killer left no note, no weapon, no obvious motive. The Lancaster County community was shaken. Who would want to harm a beloved elementary school teacher? Investigators worked tirelessly. Dozens of people were questioned, ex-boyfriends, co-workers, neighbors. Police even considered whether it was a stalker or a random attack. DNA evidence was collected from the scene, including semen. But in 1992, DNA testing was still in its early stages. The sample was stored, but no match was found in CODIS, the National DNA Database. The trail went cold. For more than 25 years, the murder of Christy Mirack haunted the community and left her family and friends with no answers. Her case became one of the most infamous cold cases in Pennsylvania. A new tool had emerged: genetic genealogy. The same technology that helped identify the Golden State Killer was now being used across the country to tackle unsolved crimes. Parabon Nanolabs, a Virginia-based DNA technology company, was brought in to analyze the DNA collected from Christy's crime scene. Using publicly available genetic databases, they built a family tree around the unknown suspect's DNA. Incredibly, they found a familial match: a man named Raymond Rowe, a local DJ in Lancaster, known as DJ Freeze. Raymond Charles Rowe was no stranger to the community. He had built a reputation as a popular wedding and club DJ in Lancaster County. He had even performed at schools, high-profile events, and charity functions. He had no criminal record. No one had ever suspected him of being capable of such violence. When investigators covertly obtained a used water bottle and gum that Rowe had discarded, it was sent for DNA testing. The results were a match. The DNA linked directly to the semen found at the scene of Christy Mirack's murder. After 26 years, they had their man. In June 2018, Raymond Rowe was arrested and charged with criminal homicide, rape, and burglary.
Faced with overwhelming evidence, Rowe chose to plead guilty. During the court hearing, he admitted to the crime, but offered no real explanation, no motive, no apology that could ease the pain of the Mirack family. He was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. District Attorney Craig Stedman called it a milestone case and credited the incredible advancements in DNA technology for helping to bring a predator to justice. For Christy's family, the arrest brought relief, but not closure. Her brother, Vince Mirack, said it was a wound that would never fully heal. She was robbed of her life, he said. She had so much to give to the world. Christy's case is a stark reminder of how far forensics has come, and how many cold cases still sit silently waiting for justice.
February 1987, a small town in Michigan. A young woman is murdered in her own home, brutally and without warning. For decades, her killer walks free. No witnesses, no arrests. Just a grieving family and a cold case that refuses to fade. But 35 years later, DNA technology would uncover the shocking truth. And the man who thought he got away with murder would finally face justice. This is the story of Roxanne Wood, and how one of Michigan's most haunting mysteries was finally solved. Roxanne Wood was 30 years old. She was vibrant, kind, and deeply loved by her friends and family. On February the 20th, 1987, she and her husband, Terry, had gone out for a night of fun, bowling and a few drinks at their local hangout in Niles, Michigan. They returned home just after midnight. Terry went upstairs to bed. Roxanne stayed downstairs, probably cleaning up or grabbing a snack. Moments later, everything changed. Terry woke to strange noises, running water, a loud thud, silence. When he came downstairs, he found a nightmare. Roxanne was lying in a pool of blood. Her throat had been slashed with a kitchen knife from their own home. The scene was violent, sudden, and completely without explanation. Police arrived quickly, but from the beginning, the case was a puzzle. There was no forced entry, no fingerprints, no clear motive. Nothing was stolen, and no suspects, except Terry. As Roxanne's husband, he was heavily scrutinized. But the evidence didn't support his guilt. He passed a polygraph test. There were no signs of struggle between them, and most importantly, there was no physical evidence linking him to the crime. So the case stalled. Then it went cold. Roxanne's murder remained unsolved. Her family devastated. Her name faded into the growing list of unsolved crimes in small-town America. For Roxanne's family, especially her siblings Brad and Janet, giving up was never an option. Year after year, they pleaded with investigators to reopen the case. They held on to hope. They kept her memory alive. And eventually, someone listened. In 2020, the Michigan State Police Cold Case Team decided to take another look. Thanks to advancements in forensic science, investigators were now able to retest biological evidence that couldn't be processed in 1987. And this time, there was a hit. The DNA matched a man named Patrick Gilham, a 67-year-old living just across the state line in Indiana. He had a record, petty crimes, breaking and entering, but nothing violent. Still, his DNA placed him at the scene of Roxanne's murder. Investigators collected DNA from a cigarette Gilham discarded. The match was confirmed after 35 years, police had their suspect. In February 2022, police arrested Patrick Gillum. At first, he denied everything, but when confronted with the DNA evidence, he cracked. He confessed to breaking into the Wood home that night. He didn't expect anyone to be there. When Roxanne walked in, he panicked and attacked. He grabbed a knife from the kitchen and ended her life in seconds. Then he fled, and for more than 3 decades, he lived free. Gillum was charged with second-degree murder. He pled no contest, avoiding a lengthy trial. In July 2022, he was sentenced to 23 to 50 years in prison. At 67 years old, he will likely die behind bars. For Roxanne's family, the day brought a mix of emotions: relief, sadness, closure. Her sister Janet said, "We finally got justice for Roxanne. We never gave up." Roxanne Wood's life was stolen in a moment of violence. But her story didn't end there. Because of her family's persistence and the power of modern science, her killer was unmasked, and her name was cleared from the cold case files for good. This is True Crime Record, and this was the case of Roxanne Wood.